Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the intensely multi-layered analysis surrounding Ilyulia Mendel's 2026 interview with Tucker Carlson. And let me tell you, this isn't just a simple case of a former employee speaking out. According to geopolitical and behavioral analysts, what we're looking at here serves as a truly fascinating case study in political deconstruction. We're going to stick strictly to the source material, the interview itself, and the wild psychological and kinetic analysis that followed it, so we can figure out exactly what's happening just beneath the surface of this broadcast.
We're going to start right out of the gate with this quote from Volodymyr Zelensky's former press secretary. He plays such a teddy bear on camera, but when the light goes off, he's a grizzly bear and he destroys the people. That is a massive, radical departure from her previously stated views, and it immediately sent shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape. In literally just one sentence, Mendel attempts to completely dismantle a very carefully constructed global image, swapping out the heroic wartime leader narrative for this depiction of an unpredictable autocrat operating in the shadows. To really wrap our heads around the scope of this analysis, we're going to quickly cover 5 key areas. First, the explosive interview itself. Second, the disconnect between her words and her body language. Third, the theory of a coordinated intelligence operation. Fourth, why Tucker Carlson was chosen as the conduit. And finally, the potential geopolitical fallout.
Okay, let's jump right into part 1, the explosive interview, and how she went from an insider to a whistleblower.
Now, analysts immediately noticed a massive contradiction here. It's a real baseline mystery. Back in her 2021 and 2022 books, Mendel painted Zelensky as this deeply empathetic meritocracy leader. She even shared this really touching anecdote about him getting down on his knees to help clean up a broken vase. But fast forward to this 2026 interview, and the contrast is just staggering. She totally flips the script, condemning him as an emotionally uncontrollable dictator, a malignant narcissist who constantly changes masks and treats people like they're completely disposable.
During the interview itself, she methodically tore down his political legitimacy using some incredibly specific, damaging claims. We're talking major accusations here. She accused him of deliberately stalling peace deals, claiming that ending the war would be political suicide for him. She said he openly demanded Goebbels propaganda from his team to artificially pump up his ratings. And perhaps most shockingly, she alleged he personally gave the green light to schemes laundering money that was meant for starving pensioners, and that he literally uses deployment to the highly dangerous front lines as a form of political punishment for anyone who criticizes him.
Which brings us to part 2, words versus body language, or what analysts call the kinetic disconnect.
So, experts in kinetic intelligence began deconstructing her on-screen behavior. If you're not familiar with the term, kinetic intelligence is basically the practice of looking past what someone is saying to evaluate the underlying emotional truth. You look at microexpressions, breathing patterns, body positioning, the whole shebang. And when analysts applied the specific framework to Mendel's interview, well, they found some deeply unsettling anomalies.
What they observed wasn't raw, unfiltered emotion. Instead, they saw highly calculated behavioral markers, like she was executing a step-by-step psychological playbook. For example, they noted these really hypnotic speech tempos. She'd drop a heavy statement like, "Slavs are killing Slavs," and then use a perfectly timed, calculated pause to sort of induce a trance-like processing state in the listener. It's absolutely fascinating to watch the breakdown. They pointed out these artificial repetitive gestures, like putting her hands over her heart to manufacture trust, and bodily mimicry, like pulling her head down into her shoulders to appear smaller and non-threatening. Finally, they noticed that during a highly dramatic direct address, her tears only appeared at the very, very end, and they looked highly forced. But here's the real kicker: 79%. When the interview was run through AI facial analysis software, it detected a 79% probability of joy and suppressed smiles exactly when Mendel was detailing horrific national tragedies. Analysts noted this incredibly sharp contrast. While Tucker Carlson was displaying genuine micro-expressions of disgust when talking about drone safaris hunting civilians and freezing retirees, the AI mapped really high markers for amusement on Mendel's face. The data literally suggests she was smiling while discussing the total devastation of her own country.
All of this naturally leads us to part 3, the intelligence operation theory. Was this whole thing a scripted demolition?
Theorists tend to frame her behavior within a very specific intelligence concept, sometimes referred to in analyst circles as the Jewish wives operational model. This theory describes highly trained female operatives who get deeply embedded into the inner circles of global elites. Their ultimate goal isn't just basic espionage. It's psychological manipulation, and when the timing is absolutely perfect, publicly reformatting narratives. Analysts suggest her flawless linguistic delivery of these complex English psychological terms, combined with that really cold nonverbal detachment we just talked about, are the absolute hallmarks of an operative trained by Western intelligence.
And the evidence they point to? It's honestly pretty compelling. First off, she had to survive an incredibly rigorous 4,000-person vetting process just to get the job initially. That's a massive filter, the exact kind intelligence agencies often use to insert assets. Second, like the AI clearly showed, she displays total emotional detachment from the absolute horror she's describing. She's executing this meticulously timed media leak, demonstrating complete internal autonomy. So in other words, analysts argue she isn't acting like a traumatized citizen at all. She's acting exactly like a professional agent, executing a textbook operation to dismantle a target who has simply outlived his usefulness.
Moving right along to Part 4, the Tucker Carlson conduit and why this bypassed the mainstream.
Now, you might be wondering, why Tucker Carlson? Geopolitical analysts argue that if these explosive claims were just funneled through traditional mainstream media outlets, a huge chunk of the public would immediately dismiss them as establishment propaganda. However, independent platforms, specifically Carlson's, hold massive sway and, crucially, immense trust among conservative Western voters. His platform provides the absolute perfect, high-trust conduit to completely bypass skepticism and legitimize these managed leaks directly to the voting base that ultimately controls foreign aid.
And finally, we arrive at Part 5, the geopolitical fallout and the terrifying idea of a controlled demolition.
To really grasp the scale of what might be happening here, look at how perfectly Mendel's messaging synchronizes with European politicians, like Alice Weidel in Germany. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. Notice the pattern. Weidel targets EU taxpayers, calling Zelensky a president of war, with the goal of stopping European weapons. Meanwhile, Mendel targets U.S. conservatives, calling him a corrupt dictator to stop U.S. funding. Analysts argue this points to a highly coordinated, transatlantic intelligence effort. The ultimate goal? To frame the leader as completely rogue, providing Western governments with a justified, controlled exit from a really costly conflict without having to take the blame themselves.
But, and this is a big but, pragmatists are waving massive red flags here, warning that this strategy carries severe strategic risks. Sure, this controlled demolition of the Ukrainian presidency provides justification for halting Western aid, but analysts warn it could easily create a catastrophic power vacuum. It leads to the total demoralization of the frontline troops and runs the very real risk of what experts call Somalization, basically fracturing the entire country into internal chaos, ruled by competing factions and warlords.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on, based on all the analysis we've explored today. If these kinetic and geopolitical theories are actually accurate, and this whole thing is a calculated media operation to dismantle the current leadership, is the intentional destruction of a nation's leadership actually a path to peace? Or is it more like pulling the pin on a grenade, triggering a power vacuum and an even darker reality for millions of innocent people? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and we'll see you next time.